Chapter 22 Mazen. The corridor was glorious, shining from floor to ceiling with beautiful mosaics. Stone pillars held up a domed ceiling covered in decorative stained glass. Skull-shaped sconces hung from the wall and contained flaming white candles that made the tiled floor flash a brilliant cerulean blue. It was, despite its eeriness, the most beautiful corridor he'd ever seen. Mazen had absolutely no idea how he'd gotten here. He could vaguely remember seeing a dune, digging into the dune, falling into the dune, once inside screaming at the pitch black of the dune. He remembered panicking, beating his fists against dark walls in an effort to find the exit, but after that his memory was a blur. It took a deep breath, and as he turned to the cracked image on his right, he beheld a clustered, chaotic depiction of what he guessed were the 7 Jinn kings. One Jinn was half bird, half man, sporting a human torso with the legs, but bird wings and a falcon head. Mazen wondered if it was a depiction of the Jinn king imprisoned by a mirror. The second Jinn was portrayed mid-spin, its features hidden behind a veil of mist. The third Jinn held a skull in one hand and a scepter in the other. The fourth had fins sprouting from its back and scales shining in its flesh. The fifth, a Jinn wearing a dara'a cut into 2 halves, one glittering with jewels and the other black and torn. And the last 2 Jinn were the strangest. One was crafted from wood and had flowers growing between its fingers, while the other was a fanged shadow with glittering red eyes. Mazen stepped back at the sight of it, heart pounding in his ears. It reminded him of the Shadow Jinn, but no, surely she had not been a Jinn king. He stifled a nervous laugh and forced himself forward. Every footstep echoed too loudly in the silent hall, and the Jinn on the walls seemed to follow him with their eyes. Don't panic. He plucked a dagger from Omar's belt in the hope that it would make him feel braver. The ruins were so quiet he could hear the rustle of his clothing, the frantic pounding of his heart. Usually, even silence had a sound, some underlying cadence that went unnoticed until all other noises disappeared. But this absence was absolute, unnatural. Don't panic. He forced himself to walk, and walk, and walk. His stomach jumped into his throat when he again saw the image of the 7 Jinn. He knew it was the same because the stone was chipped in the same places. He wasn't walking down an endless corridor. He was walking in place. The fire nearby wavered. Mazen's grip on the blade tightened. His muscles tensed, his breathing hitched, and he thought, "Oh gods, please don't let me be possessed. Please." Salam. He turned and thrust the dagger forward. It sliced through nothing. The stranger was far enough away that the blade never even brushed his skin. Mazen froze. He knew this woman. Long hair that gleamed like polished wood, freckled olive skin, gold eyes flecked with uneven brow. Mazen lowered his blade. Those were his eyes, his mother's eyes. Uma? He blinked, and somehow, impossibly, she did not disappear. "Habibi," she murmured. He flinched, but did not pull away when she placed a hand on his cheek. Her skin was cold, so very cold, but her hand was so soft. When she pulled it away, Mazen felt as if she'd unwound some vital thread from inside him. He blinked, and his mother wavered on the spot like a mirage. Uma, his fingers swept through air. "Habibi." He turned and saw her standing farther down the corridor, holding a lantern that glowed with the same garish light as the candles in the sconces. She gestured him forward, a soft smile on her face. "Follow me." He stepped forward. "Where are you going?" But Shafia did not answer. She turned and walked away, and the flames in the sconces flickered and died as she passed them. Darkness nipped at Mazen's heels. "Inconsequential," it whispered. He shrank away from it and chased after his mother. His heartbeat drummed in his ears and throbbed behind his eyes. He was vaguely aware of the sudden heaviness of his body and the strange pressure building in his head. He felt the iron rings too hot and tight on his fingers, and then nothing. Every time he blinked, his mind grew foggier, until it was empty of everything save for the gentle humming. The corridor ceased to exist. There was just his mother singing a song beneath her breath. "The stars, they burn in the night and guide the sheik's way." Mazen did not recognize the lyrics, yet he found himself humming along with his eyes half closed, relishing the strange feeling of nostalgia that washed over him. They passed through chambers that flourished before his eyes, One moment they were filled with cobwebs and dirt, and the next elaborate tapestries stretched across the walls and rich rugs unrolled beneath their feet. They entered what appeared to be a diwan, where skeletons sat hunched over cups filled with beetles. But as Mazen passed, the skeletons became living people who raised their cups to him and cried, "Savior! Savior!" More than a few times he wondered if he ought to voice his concerns. "What am I saving you from?" he wanted to ask. Or perhaps, "How are you alive, Uma?" But the urge faded every time his mother sang. The song was still echoing in his mind long after she stopped, still numbing his thoughts, when his mother spoke into the quiet. "Do you know the story of the Queen of Dunes, Mazen?" Mazen heard her words, but for some reason was unable to grasp their meaning. He smiled, hoping it was the appropriate response. His mother smiled back. It was the same bright smile she'd always worn, the one that made dimples appear on the corners of her mouth. "She can make all of your wishes come true, even the impossible ones." She paused at the bottom of a staircase that spiraled up into a dark tower. She mounted the rickety wooden stairs. "But all wishes have a price," she continued. "The Queen will make a request of you. You must accept before she will give you your heart's desire. If you wish it, I can even raise the dead." A deep but gentle voice caressed his mind. Mazen's heart lurched at the sound of it. His vision blurred and his mother vanished. In her place was a gangly, pale creature with long limbs and gaping holes for eye sockets. It spoke to him in his mother's voice. "You'll help me, won't you, Mazen?" Mazen opened his mouth to gasp, to scream, but then the humming began again and soothed away his fears. The creature disappeared, and it was once again his mother, standing before him, brows scrunched with concern. "Of course I'll help you, Uma," she beamed. "I knew I could count on you, Mazen." He blinked, not realizing he'd said the words aloud, but he supposed it didn't matter. His mother had always been good at deciphering his expressions. He stopped. He'd forgotten he was in Omar's body. How did his mother... "We've arrived." She gestured ahead to the set of bronze doors at the stair landing. "Remember what I said. Nothing sacrificed, nothing gained." Mazen hesitated. That strange fogginess was invading his mind again, making it impossible for him to grasp his thoughts. But then his mother set a hand on his shoulder, and his focus shattered completely. "Have faith, Mazen." Her words were soft as a conspiratorial whisper. "Not everything that is stolen from us must remain so." Mazen turned away. He breathed in, and then he slowly approached the doors. He knew all about loss. He had lost his mother. He had lost his freedom. Now he had even lost his identity. "I can bring her back," the humming voice said in his mind. "I can bring back your mother." The door opened into a circular chamber lit by fading torchlight. A deft wind blew through cracks in the decrepit walls, ruffling maroon-colored drapes. Save for the rustling, the space was disconcertingly quiet, the empty circular chamber made up of cracked walls. And then Mazen heard a crunch as he stepped into the room. He looked down and saw bones on the tiled floor. He recognized vaguely that this discovery ought to be upsetting, that it probably was cause for concern, but he did not have time to worry, so he tucked the realization away to be evaluated at a later time and continued toward a stone dais rising above the sea of bones. Sitting atop the dais was a circlet, a ring of intricately carved golden skulls. Some distant part of him wondered why he gravitated towards it, but did not allow himself to linger on the thought, for he knew the circlet would make his wishes come true. He had only to possess it, and then I will be queen once more. Mazen began to hum as he stepped up on the dais. The bones whispered as he reached for the crown. "Queen, queen, queen." The word pulsed through his body, through his fingertips. He grasped the circlet of bones.